I start off by asking what I asked you earlier. How you stay? Can you breathe?
I can.
Did you think about breathing? Not a
I
chance.
I do so a little bit more than
Than the normal
before
person.
COVID.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And even so, because we're on air, and so when you breathe, you have to remember that the mic is right before you.
Yes.
Yeah? But most of us, unless you have suffered from COPD or some other lung or respiratory illness, you don't need to have any faith that oxygen is in the air. You simply breathe. Normally, the oxygen is in you. It's around you. You can't see it, but you can breathe it until, of course, like you just said, you get COVID-19. Then suddenly, this conversation for oxygen is dominating the reality of COVID-19 right across the globe. Though, Tana, is that a large number of persons, enough people, are dying for lack of access to medical oxygen. Every day, tens of thousands of people are admitted to hospitals with COVID-19, driving the demand for oxygen far beyond the supply. In a report prepared in March of this year by Doctors Without Borders, many of the world's health systems were described as grasping for air. So Jamaica, we as Jamaicans have been blessed. It took us the third wave, the whole of 3 waves, for many of us to realize how real COVID is and how important medical oxygen is to our hospitals. So to be fair, Tana, when we challenged the government as to whether it had enough, why it didn't have enough, will it have enough, and the government has now told us last night that there'll be enough oxygen generators and concentrators, we must place all of this conversation into the context of our global reality, the need for oxygen. Many international periodicals, enough papers right across the globe, Fortune, New York Times, The Conversation, Washington Times, The Guardian, just to name a few, have for the last 8 months highlighted how many healthcare systems globally have been struck by oxygen shortage. It's not new, it's scarce. Things are so serious worldwide that the great WHO, the World Health Organization, said only in February of this year that it needed 1.6 billion to remedy the oxygen shortage for a year. Now, less than 8 months later, it's up to 6.5 billion. So with the latest estimates showing that around 1 million, did you hear my figure right? 1 million COVID-19 patients in low and middle income countries, which includes Jamaica, need 2.2 million cylinders of oxygen per day. So we must understand where we are in this reality. There is a global oxygen crisis. Medical oxygen is scarce. It was only on the 15th of June of this year that the world saw an unprecedented cooperation under the COVID-19 Oxygen Emergency Task Force. Yes, there is something called that, a committee internationally organized for 2 of the world's largest medical oxygen suppliers to collaborate to provide increased access to oxygen for low middle income countries, which includes Jamaica. This agreement came about in June. So, less than 3 months ago, Air Liquide and Linde paved the way for increased oxygen supply in the context of COVID-19. But what I find funny though, and I put it out there because we have been asking that question, not talking about the global crisis in the media, so that our listeners and people understand what's happening internationally with oxygen and the agreements needed to get medical oxygen to countries. I still find it funny that we seem to forget we've had a pop-down healthcare system that served the poor, and a system that didn't even put a band-aid on the revolving door of politicians since KPH was established on December 14, 1776, whole of 245 years ago. At the time, it catered only to the whites. Then when it started to treat the slaves in 1838, it was deemed an almshouse hospital. In my living memory, and no doubt yours, the not too poor always took a flight to Kingston 21 and its environs for medical treatment. And since many are now forced to stay here, the clamor concerning a lack of equipment and resources are now being blamed on the current government. Seriously, I hold no brief for the government, no lie. But as a Jamaican, I cannot help but bemoan how short-sighted we are. For years, we've had antiquated hospitals which have not been upgraded with the latest technology, and it seems disingenuous at least that the demands for improved oxygen options, which have been around for more than 20 years, are coming from people who ought to know and understand that there is a global shortage of oxygen created by the pandemic. And even if we were to order all the oxygen generators and concentrators we need, they would not arrive in time to treat the crisis we are in now. Better yet, If you went online and you looked at the companies and you look at the orders, you would have seen that these companies have indicated that they are short of components, so the equipment is in short supply. So to my mind, we have treated the healthcare system like most of us have treated our own health under COVID. We are strong and resilient, so we don't need to take the protocol seriously until COVID catches us at a Bluetooth party or a silent party, and then only then we realize that we should have done something to preserve the health of our friends and families. Likewise, we should have done more to make sure that our hospitals can accommodate everybody when they're sick. So I think the lesson going forward, and that's the lesson we need to take from COVID, Tana, that we need to have a first-class health system that is prioritized, modernized, including its workers and its moving parts. It means that we now have to put healthcare on the top of our agenda to ensure that we can achieve Vision 2030. But the reality is still, what do we do now? Because in the here and now, no matter how much generators or concentrators we get for oxygen, that is not going to prevent a COVID surge. So the message ought not to be that we're going to get more oxygen for those who do not believe that COVID is real, or for those who are willing to wait and see if the vaccine works. I think the message ought to be, we don't have enough oxygen to give you. So if you want to live, turn out your yard, and if you have to go out, watch the crowd and follow the protocol. Simple. George Bush said, read my lips. I say, listen to my voice. Oxygen scarce. It's short everywhere in the world. And unfortunately, there is none on a shelf for you or me or anybody close to us. So whilst everyone cannot be and will not be pleased with that which I say, the aim is to provide a system that is seamless as possible to get the jabs into our arms before they expire and to reduce the need for oxygen. A need which, if you do not take the vaccine, exists and exposes you to severe COVID disease. So nobody's forcing anybody, and don't even think for a minute that we're fearmongering or telling you that you must take the vaccine. All we're saying is, it is your choice. Just remember, should you get COVID disease, it's a consequence of your choice. Do not blame anyone for not being able to get oxygen. You already know the kind of health system we have. So I think you ought to alert your family and friends that they shouldn't go blaming the government or anybody for that matter because there's not enough oxygen. It's a global crisis. We already have a pop-down system. We have struggling healthcare workers who are trying with their superhuman effort to keep us alive. The least you can do is to be responsible for your actions. If you choose not to take the vaccine and there is no oxygen, I just saw it go. Your problem that. Perhaps it's time for you to make your own arrangements, because at the end of the day, there is only so much we can do as a group and as a people to be safe. So on my mind, where I think we need to go is to appreciate that all our actions have consequences. So, on one hand, we've had a failed system of healthcare, which we have not prioritized, and we now must deal with it in the pandemic. We get that. But we also have our own actions as individuals, which have consequences. So if you choose not to take the vaccine, full stop. Your choice. Just be aware that oxygen is short, and it doesn't matter how many concentrators or generators we get, you will not be able to save your life because it more than likely will not get here in time. That's where my mind is at when it comes to the oxygen situation and COVID. But as I take another breath though, I just want to show you how we stay. Paralympics began on August 24th and it ends on the 5th of September. And we say we are such an inclusive society. We talk a lot about equality and fairness and equal treatment. Yet our own disabled athletes are not even given the same recognition for their exploits at the Game of Games. Just another reminder that there's still a class of citizens we ignore to our detriment. So we're not so inclusive after all. And yet we argue so loudly that we want an inclusive society, a place to live and work and play, as we consistently fail to realize that we don't give equal attention to everybody in the society. Just a gentle reminder that Paralympics still are going and we can give it some attention. Because it's not just about equal treatment under the healthcare system, it's being able to give equal treatment everywhere, every time, to everyone. That's what's on my mind.